The return to the Aetheris was silent. The Star Weaver glided through the void like a shadow. No alarms, no signals, no challenge. The hollow did not stop them. They did not need to. They believed the ship was already theirs. They did not know it now carried something they could not control. Claire guided the vessel into a hidden docking bay deep in the ship's underbelly. Lyria was weak but awake, her eyes clear for the first time in days. Nyx walked beside her but slower now, his steps careful, his scales dull like old stone. He no longer glowed, yet his presence felt heavier, not less. They moved through empty corridors. The Aetheris felt wrong, too quiet. Lights flickered in strange rhythms. Crew members stood in hallways staring at walls, not moving, not speaking. Their eyes were empty. The hollow have taken most of the ship, Lyria said softly. Can we reach the bridge? Not yet. They expect us to try. We must be smarter. They took shelter in an old maintenance hub sealed behind layers of forgotten code. Claire used her comm to scan for clean signals. Nothing. Every channel hummed with the same low tone, the signal. We are cut off. Not entirely, Lyria said. The Star Weaver still answers, and Nyx remembers. The dragon lifted his head at the sound of his name. He walked to a wall panel and tapped it with his claw. A hidden door slid open, revealing a narrow shaft. An old escape route. Used during the First War, they climbed for hours. The shaft twisted through the ship's bones past power cores and memory vaults. Once they passed a chamber where dozens of hollows stood in perfect circles, unmoving like statues waiting for a command. Claire held her breath. Lyria gripped her arm. Nyx pressed close, his body warm despite his dull scales. Finally, they reached the upper decks near the command spire. From a vent, they watched the bridge. The High Concord envoys sat in their seats, but their movements were stiff, their voices flat. At the center stood a figure cloaked in silver robes, its face hidden. It spoke in a voice that was many voices at once, smooth and cold. The final alignment begins. The galaxy will be made whole. That is not a delegate, Claire whispered. It is the core of the hollow, the first infected. It has been waiting centuries. We have to stop it. How? There are hundreds of them. Not all are lost. Some fight inside. We just cannot see it. The countermeasure can free them, but it must be activated at the source. The core. Yes, and only the Star Weaver can reach it, but the ship is docked. We will fly it from here, straight through the heart of the Aetheris. Claire looked at her. That will tear the ship apart. Better one ship than all mines. Nyx made a low sound. Not fear, readiness. They moved fast. Back through the shaft to the hidden bay. Claire powered up the Star Weaver. The ship responded instantly, its systems humming with new purpose. The core pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Lyria took the co-pilot seat. Her hands shook, but her voice was steady. Fly true, Claire. Do not aim for the core. Aim for the silence around it. What does that mean? You will know when you see it. The Star Weaver launched, not with fire, but with a ripple in space itself. It tore through the Aetheris hull like paper. Alarms blared, but too late. Hollow envoys turned their blank faces upward, but could not react fast enough. Claire flew through the ship's interior corridors, now wide open like tunnels. Walls melted away before the ship's energy field. She saw crew members frozen in place, their eyes flickering between empty and aware. Fighting. Then she saw it. At the center of the ship, where the main reactor should be, there was no machine, only a sphere of pure darkness. Not black, not empty, wrong. It swallowed light, sound, thought. Around it, the hollow knelt in perfect circles, chanting in unison. That is the silence, Lyria said. Claire aimed for it. The Star Weaver shot forward. The hollow rose as one. They threw themselves at the ship, not to stop it, but to join it, to infect it. Their bodies burst against the hull, turning to dust that tried to seep into the cracks. Nyx stood on the bridge, his body trembling. He opened his mouth and released a sound so deep it vibrated the ship's bones. The dust recoiled. Claire hit the core, not with weapons, not with force. She opened the Star Weaver's core and let the countermeasure flow out. Not as a weapon. As a song, light erupted. Not bright, not loud, but alive. It spread through the Aetheris like breath through lungs. The hollow screamed as one then fell silent. Their bodies collapsed. Their eyes cleared for a moment before going still. On the bridge, the cloaked figure turned. It looked at Claire through the viewport. Its face was gone. Only smooth skin where features should be. You are chaos, it said. You do not belong. I belong here, Claire said. And so do they. She pushed the song harder. Human music mixed with silvery resonance. Jazz and starlight. logic and madness, hope and stubbornness. The figure shattered. The silence vanished. The core dissolved into light. The Aetheris groaned as systems rebooted. Lights returned to normal. Voices came back over the comms, confused but real. "It is done," Lyria whispered. But Claire was not done. She turned the Starweaver toward the outer hull. They had to get out before the ship sealed itself again. As they broke into open space, the Aetheris shuddered, then stabilized. Rescue ships from clean zones moved in. The summit was over. The Hollow were gone. Back aboard, the Aetheris medics tended to the freed crew. Many would recover. Some would not. The cost was high. Claire found Lyria on a quiet observation deck. Nyx lay at her feet, his breathing slow. He looked smaller now, almost fragile. "He gave too much," Claire said. "He gave what was needed, and he chose to give it to you. Why me? Because you see people, not just species, not just logic. You see the person beneath, even in me." Claire sat beside her. They watched the stars in silence. "I am not a hero," she said. "You do not have to be. You just have to be human." Nyx lifted his head and nudged Claire's hand. His eyes were dull but kind. He was still here, still with them. The Concord would question them, demand answers, call them reckless. But none of that mattered now, because something had changed, not just in the ship, not just in the war, but in the way the galaxy saw humanity. They were not primitive, not chaotic in a bad way. They were the wild card, the unexpected note in a perfect song, the crack that lets the light in. And as long as Claire Ellis flew and Lyria Velan stood and Nyx breathed, they would remind the stars that sometimes the most powerful thing in the universe is a simple act of trust. No orders, no plans, just one human who sat down beside a lonely princess and changed everything. The summit resumed aboard the Aetheris, but the air had changed. Tension hung thick like fog. Delegates spoke in hushed tones and avoided eye contact. Some moved with odd stiffness, as if their joints were not quite their own. Claire noticed it right away. She watched the way certain envoys tilted their heads at the same angle or blinked in perfect unison. It was subtle but wrong, very wrong. Lyria spent most of her time in the ship's central archive, a place few were allowed to enter. Claire was now one of them. They worked side by side, scanning old records, cross-referencing names and events. Nyx stayed close, always near Lyria, but his eyes often followed Claire as if checking she was still there. One night, while reviewing a damaged data crystal, Claire found something strange. A series of symbols hidden in the background code. They looked like Silthari script, but twisted slightly off. She showed it to Lyria. Lyria went very still. Her fingers trembled as she traced the symbols on the screen. "This is the mark of the Hollow. It was used to tag infected minds during the war. We thought it was lost, so they are using it again." "Yes. And someone here is spreading it. But how?" "Through sound, through light, through thought. The signal hides in plain sight. In music and comms in dreams. It waits for weakness, then slips in." Claire thought of the red pulse in the comms unit on Selûne, the way the drones acted, the blank faces in the dark. It all fit. "We need to find the source." Lyria nodded, but her face was pale. She leaned against the console for support. Claire caught her before she fell. Lyria's skin was cold. Her breath came fast and shallow. Beneath her robe, her veins glowed faintly black like ink spreading under glass. "No," she whispered. Nyx let out a low, mournful sound and pressed his head against her leg. "What is happening?" Claire asked. "The signal has found me. It is trying to take root. But you are Silthari. You should be immune. I am not immune, only resistant. And my strength is fading." Claire helped her to a chair. Her mind raced. They needed help, but who could they trust? Every medic, every officer could already be hollow. Then an idea struck her. "Your bloodline carries a defense, and Nyx is part of it. Maybe he can help." Lyria looked at the dragon. Nyx stared back, his eyes glowing soft violet. Slowly, he stepped forward and touched his snout to Lyria's hand. A pulse of light traveled up her arm. The black veins faded slightly, but did not vanish. "It is not enough. He needs more time." "We don't have time." Claire made a decision. She activated her comm and called the ship's medical bay. She gave false symptoms, fake readings. She said Lyria had collapsed from stress and needed immediate care. She knew the medics would come. She just hoped they were still themselves. 2 medics arrived. They moved smoothly, too smoothly. Their eyes held no spark. Claire acted fast. She tripped the first one with a chair, then shoved the second into the wall. They did not cry out. They did not bleed. They just got up and came again. Nyx leapt. His claws tore through their uniforms, revealing not flesh but woven filaments pulsing with dark energy. The hollow shells collapsed into dust. Claire grabbed Lyria and ran. They headed for the lower decks where the old Sylthari warships were stored, forgotten relics from a time no one wanted to remember. The Aetheris shook as alarms blared. Lights flickered. Doors sealed shut. Someone was locking them in. Nyx led the way, his body glowing faintly now. He seemed to know where to go. They reached a sealed hangar deep in the ship's belly. The door was marked with the same twisted symbol. "This is it," Lyria whispered. "The heart of the old fleet." Claire pried the door open with a plasma torch from her belt. Inside sat a single vessel, sleek and sharp like a blade. Its hull was black with silver veins running through it like nerves. It looked alive. "The Star Weaver," Lyria said. "Last of the bloodline ships. It sleeps. Can we wake it?" "Only with a key, and the key is me." She stepped forward and placed her hand on the hull. The ship hummed. Lights flared to life along its surface. The ramp lowered with a hiss. They boarded quickly. The interior was warm and humming with energy. The walls pulsed like a living heart. Nyx curled in the center of the bridge, his scales now shimmering with the same silver veins as the ship. Claire found the pilot seat. It molded to her shape as if it had been waiting. Controls lit up under her hands. Not Sylthari symbols, but something older, something that felt familiar. "How is this possible?" she asked. "The ship chooses its pilot. It has chosen you, but I am human. Perhaps that is why." Lyria slumped into a nearby chair, her strength nearly gone. The black veins were spreading again, faster now. She looked at Claire. Her eyes filled with pain and trust. "You must fly us to the asteroid belt beyond Kalos. There is a derelict there. The first Star Weaver. It holds the core of the original countermeasure. What do I do when we get there?" "Trust your instincts, and listen to Nyx." The ship lifted off without sound. It slipped through the Aetheris hull like smoke through fingers. Alarms screamed behind them, but no weapons fired. The Hollow did not want to destroy the ship. They wanted to control it. In orbit, Claire pushed the engines hard. Stars blurred into streaks. Nyx lay still, his breathing slow. Lyria drifted in and out of consciousness. Halfway to the belt, the ship shuddered. A wave of static filled the cabin. Voices whispered in Claire's mind, smooth and calm, telling her to stop, to surrender, to rest. She gritted her teeth and played an old Earth song on the comm. Jazz. Fast and messy, the kind of music that made no sense but felt right. The whispers faltered. "Good," she muttered. They reached the belt under cover of a solar storm. Rocks drifted in silence, some as big as cities. The derelict hung in the center of it, all broken and dark. The first Star Weaver. Claire docked carefully. The airlock opened with a groan. Inside, the ship was cold and dead. But as they stepped in, lights flickered on one by one as if waking. They found the core chamber deep in the ship's heart. A sphere of crystal floated in the center, pulsing with soft blue light. But around it, shadows moved, hollow forms waiting. Nyx growled low and deep. He stepped forward, his body now fully glowing violet. He opened his mouth and released a sound, not a roar but a frequency that shattered the shadows like glass. The crystal brightened. Lyria staggered forward and placed her hands on the sphere. Her body arched as light poured into her. The black veins burned away. But the strain was too much. She collapsed. Claire caught her. She looked at the core, then at Nyx. "What do I do?" Nyx walked to the core and touched it with his snout. Then he turned to Claire and nudged her hand toward the crystal. "You want me to touch it?" He nodded. She reached out. The moment her skin met the surface, pain exploded through her. Visions flooded her mind. Ancient battles. Dying stars. Sylthari singing songs of light. And a single truth the Hollow could not understand: chaos was not weakness. It was freedom. The core accepted her. Not as Sylthari. Not as enemy. But as human. Light filled the chamber. The ship groaned as systems rebooted. Outside, the storm cleared. But Nyx was changing. His scales dulled. His glow faded. He shrank slightly, as if part of him had been given away. "What did you do?" Claire whispered. "He gave his essence to bind the core to you, to make it work through human hands." Lyria's voice was weak but clear. "He chose you." Nyx looked at Claire and made a soft sound. Not a purr. Not a growl. A promise. Claire knelt and put her forehead against his. Tears fell, but she did not wipe them away. "Thank you," she said. They returned to the second Star Weaver. The ship hummed stronger now. Ready. As they left the derelict behind, Claire looked at the stars ahead. She was no longer just a pilot. She was a bridge, between species, between logic and instinct, between order and chaos. And somewhere in the dark the Hollow waited. But now they had a weapon they could not predict. A human heart, a dragon's soul, and a princess who finally had someone to fight beside. Aboard the grand vessel Aetheris, drifting between the rings of Kalos, the Galactic Concord gathered for the first time in over a century. Delegates from more than 100 worlds filled the observation chamber, its walls shimmering with soft blue light that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. Some species had too many eyes, others too few. Some spoke in clicks, others in hums. But all shared one unspoken rule: they kept their distance from the far end of the crescent table. There sat Lyria Valen. She was tall and slender, with skin like moonlit pearl and hair that fell in silver waves past her waist. Her ears tapered to delicate points, and her eyes glowed faintly amber even in the bright chamber. She wore robes of woven starlight fabric that shifted color with her mood, though no one had ever seen them change. Beside her on the polished obsidian floor lay Nyx, a creature no larger than a hunting hound but unmistakably draconic. Its scales were black as void space and seemed to drink the light around it. Nyx never moved unless Lyria did. It never growled unless she tensed. And it had not blinked once in the 3 days since the summit began. Whispers followed Lyria wherever she went. Some said she had watched her entire bloodline perish in the last great war and had not shed a tear. Others claimed her voice could unravel a mind if spoken too directly. Most believed she carried a curse and that anyone who sat too close would vanish by dawn. 2 envoys had tried to speak with her during arrival protocols. Neither had been seen since. The Siltheri Empire had once ruled half the spiral arm with grace and precision. Now they were shadows of their former glory, reduced to cautious diplomacy and veiled threats. Lyria was their last heir and their final hope. Yet she remained utterly alone. Then the human delegation arrived. They were late. Their shuttle had suffered engine failure near the outer beacon, and their comms had been scrambled by solar flares. When they finally stepped into the chamber, they were dusty, disheveled, and clearly out of place. Humans were still new to the Concord, barely 30 standard years into membership. They had no grand history, no ancient bloodlines, no psychic gifts, just stubbornness, fast ships, and a strange habit of smiling when things went wrong. Most of the humans stayed near the entrance, looking uncomfortable in their stiff uniforms. But one among them moved differently. She was young, with short brown hair and eyes that darted around like she was reading exits, not faces. Her name was Claire Ellis. She had flown the damaged shuttle herself, patched the comms with spare wiring, and argued with 3 Siltheri customs officers just to get her crew through the gate. Now she scanned the room, not with awe but with quiet focus. Her gaze landed on Lyria, not with fear, not with curiosity, just recognition, as if she had expected to find her there. Without a word, Claire walked forward, past the throngs of diplomats, past the hovering drones, past the armed honor guards. The chamber grew quieter with every step. Some delegates leaned away. Others froze mid-gesture. A few actually backed up. Claire reached the empty seat beside Lyria. It had been empty since the summit began. No one had dared claim it, not even the high envoy of the Zinthari hive. She sat down. The silence that followed was so deep it felt like sound itself had fled the room. Lyria did not turn. She did not flinch. She simply continued staring at the holographic star map hovering above the table. But her fingers, which had been resting lightly on the armrest, twitched once. Just once. Nyx lifted its head. The dragon's eyes were not reptilian. They were deep and intelligent, like polished onyx holding galaxies within. It looked at Claire not with suspicion, but with something close to assessment. Then slowly, deliberately, it made a sound no one had ever heard before. A purr. Soft, low, and rumbling like distant thunder wrapped in velvet. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Someone dropped a data slate. Another delegate crossed their arms as if warding off bad luck. The Siltheri ambassador 2 seats down went pale and whispered a prayer under his breath. Claire did not react. She simply placed her hands on the table, palms down, and waited. Moments passed. Then Lyria spoke. Her voice was quiet, but carried through the chamber like a blade through silk. You are human. Yes, Mom, Claire replied. Simply, you know what happens to those who sit near me. I heard the stories, and yet you came. Someone had to. Lyria finally turned her head. Her amber eyes locked onto Claire's. Most beings looked away within seconds, unable to bear the weight of that gaze. Claire held it. Not defiantly. Not bravely. Just steadily, as if meeting the eyes of another person and nothing more. Why? Claire shrugged slightly. You looked like you could use a friend. A ripple of shock went through the room. Friendship was not a concept the Scifi used lightly. To them, it was a bond forged over decades of shared trials not offered on a whim by a stranger in a dusty uniform. Lyria studied her for a long moment. Then the faintest shift occurred in her expression. Not a smile. Not even close. But the hard edge around her eyes softened by a fraction. Your ship was damaged. Yes. Solar flare fried half our systems. I rerouted power through the secondary thrusters. Got us here in one piece. You flew manually. When the autopilot glitched, yeah. The Scifi valued logic, precision, and flawless execution. Human pilots were known for improvising, for using gut instinct over calculations. Many considered it reckless. Lyria tilted her head slightly as if seeing Claire not as a chaotic anomaly, but as something else entirely. Nyx stood up. It stretched its wings just enough to show the iridescent sheen beneath its black scales, then padded silently to Claire's side. It did not touch her. It simply sat beside her boots, its tail curling around her chair leg like a cat claiming warmth. The chamber erupted in hushed voices. This had never happened. Never. Nyx had never approached anyone but Lyria. Never acknowledged another being as anything but background noise. Lyria watched the dragon, then looked back at Claire. You are not afraid? Should I be? Most are. Most don't know you. A silence settled between them, heavier than before. But different now. Not cold, not hostile. Just waiting. The summit resumed. Debates continued about trade routes, border disputes, and reparations from the Khvor War. But no one paid attention to the words. All eyes kept drifting to the far end of the table where the alien princess sat beside a human pilot who had done the impossible not by force or title, but by simply sitting down. Later, as the session ended and delegates began to file out, Lyria rose. Nyx followed as always. But before she left, she paused beside Claire's chair. You will be assigned quarters in the Eastern Wing. Sector 7. Claire nodded. Thank you. Do not thank me. It is protocol for liaisons. Liaison. You sat beside me. That makes you my temporary liaison, whether you wanted it or not. Claire almost smiled. Guess I should have thought this through. Perhaps. But you did not, and that is why it worked. Lyria turned to leave, then stopped. Without looking back, she added one last thing. Do not be late tomorrow, and do not bring coffee. The smell offends Nyx. Then she was gone, her silver hair catching the light like a comet's tail. Claire sat alone for a moment, staring at the empty space where Lyria had been. Around her, the chamber emptied quickly, as if afraid to be near her now. She didn't mind. She was used to being the odd one out. But for the first time in her life, she felt like she had stumbled into something bigger than a mission. Bigger than politics. Something old and strange and waiting. And somewhere down the hall, a black dragon curled beside a princess who had not been alone in a very long time. The stars outside the viewport burned cold and distant. But inside the ethera, something had shifted. Quietly. Irrevocably. No one sat beside the alien princess. Until the human pilot quietly did. The final battle did not begin with a warning. It began with silence. The Aetheris hung in orbit above the dying star of Viel, its hull scarred but whole. Below, the star pulsed red and slow like a heart giving out. Around it, the hollow gathered. Not as ships, not as soldiers, but as a single shape rising from the void, a being made of stolen thoughts and twisted wills. It had no face, no form, only a shifting mass of dark light that swallowed starlight as it grew. The Concord fleets formed a ring around it. Weapons charged, but they did not fire. They could not. The hollow had already touched their minds. Their hands hovered over triggers but did not press. Their eyes stared blankly ahead. On the bridge of the Aetheris, Claire stood beside Lyria. Nyx lay at their feet, his body small but his presence strong. The dragon's scales no longer glowed, but his eyes held a quiet fire. They are lost, Claire said. Not all. Some still fight inside, but they need a spark. The Starweaver waited in the hangar ready. It hummed with the countermeasure the song of light and chaos. But it was not enough. The hollow had grown too large, too deep. It was not just a signal now. It was a god of silence. We cannot fight it with weapons, Lyria said. It feeds on order, on control, on perfect design. Then we give it something it cannot eat. What? As Claire walked to the hangar alone, Lyria stayed on the bridge to guide the final resonance. Nyx followed Claire, his steps slow but sure. The Star Weaver welcomed her. The seat shaped itself to her body. The controls lit under her hands like old friends. She did not plan a route. She did not calculate angles. She closed her eyes and listened to the hum of the ship, to the whisper of the core, to the soft breath of Nyx in the back. Then she launched. The Star Weaver shot from the Aetheris, not with fire but with sound. Claire opened every comm channel, every speaker, every frequency, and she played music. Not Silthari hymns, not war chants. Human jazz, old Earth songs full of wrong notes and sudden joy. Music that made no sense but felt true. The Hollow turned. It saw the tiny ship and reached for it with tendrils of dark thought. Claire did not dodge. She flew straight in. As she entered the entity's field, the ship shook. Visions flooded her mind. Memories not her own. Fears, regrets. The Hollow showed her every failure, every loss, every moment she had doubted herself. It whispered that she was small, that she did not matter, that chaos always loses to order. For a moment she believed it. Then she remembered Lyria's hand on the core, Nyx's purr in the quiet dark. The way the Silthari princess had looked at her not as a stranger but as someone worth trusting. She was not alone. She pushed the throttle full. The Star Weaver pierced the heart of the Hollow, and instead of firing, she opened the core. Light burst out, not as a weapon, as a question. What if you are wrong? The Hollow had no answer. It had only commands, only control. It did not know how to handle doubt, how to hold space for something that did not fit. The music played louder. A saxophone wailed. A piano laughed. A voice sang about rain and hope and coming home. The Hollow shuddered. On the Aetheris, Lyria raised her hands. She sang the old Silthari song of remembrance, not to destroy but to remind, to call back every mind the Hollow had taken. The two songs met in the void. Human chaos, Silthari grace, and between them something new was born. The Hollow screamed, not in pain, in confusion. Then it began to unravel, not explode, not vanish, but come apart like a knot finally loosened. The stolen thoughts returned to their owners. The twisted wills softened. The dark light faded into starlight. Silence returned, but not the Hollow's silence. The quiet after rain, the peace after storm. Claire drifted in the Star Weaver, her hands shaking. The ship was damaged but alive. Nyx nuzzled her shoulder, his breath warm. You did it, he seemed to say. We did it. Back on the Aetheris, the fleet stirred. Pilots blinked. Commanders lowered their weapons. They looked at each other not as enemies but as survivors. The summit reconvened not in the grand chamber but on the observation deck, where the stars were clear. Delegates gathered slowly, some limping, some crying. All changed. Lyria stood at the front. She wore no crown, no robes of state, just simple cloth and her silver hair loose. Beside her stood Claire in her patched uniform, and at their feet Nyx, small but proud. The high envoy of the Zinthari hive stepped forward. He bowed low. We were wrong about humanity. You are not broken. You are whole in a way we forgot. Others nodded. Species that had once sneered now spoke with respect. Not because humans had won, but because they had offered something no one else could. A way through the impossible. Lyria turned to Claire. You will have a place here. Not as a guest. Not as a pilot. But as a voice. Claire shook her head. I am just a human. You are the human who sat down. That is enough. In the days that followed, the galaxy began to heal. The Hollow were gone, but their lesson remained. Perfection is fragile. Chaos is strong. And sometimes the bravest thing is to simply be near someone who is alone. Claire stayed aboard the Aetheris, not as a liaison. As a friend. She taught Silthari engineers how to jury rig systems. She flew patrols with Zinthari scouts. She even learned to brew tea that Nyx would tolerate. Lyria no longer sat at the end of the table alone. Claire always took the seat beside her, and no one dared say a word. Nyx grew stronger slowly. His scales never regained their full shine, but his eyes held more light than ever. He slept at the foot of Claire's bed now, not out of duty, but choiced one evening as they watched the stars from the deck. Lyria spoke, softly. They will write songs about this, maybe. They will call it, The Day Humanity Saved the Galaxy. Claire smiled. I just sat down, and that changed everything. Far away on 100 worlds, children heard the story. Of the alien princess no one would approach. Of the human pilot who did not ask why. Of the dragon who purred for the first time. And they learned that courage is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is just a chair pulled close. The stars burned on cold and endless, but in the heart of the Aetheris there was warmth, trust, and a friendship that defied species logic and fear. No one sat beside the alien princess, until the human pilot quietly did, and the universe has not been the same since. Claire Ellis woke to the low hum of the Aetheris engines and the soft chime of morning cycle alerts. Her quarters in Sector 7 were small but clean, with walls that glowed faintly white, and a viewport showing the endless stretch of stars. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, and reached for the uniform folded neatly at the foot of her bed. It still smelled like smoke from the shuttle fire. She didn't mind. Breakfast was a paste of protein and fruit served by a silent service drone. She ate quickly, then checked her comm badge. No messages, no orders. Just silence. That worried her more than shouting. She made her way to the eastern wing where Lyria stayed. The halls were quiet. Most Silthari preferred solitude, and the few crew members she passed gave her wide berth. Some stared. Others looked away fast. She ignored them all. Lyria's door opened before she knocked. Nick sat just inside, his black scales gleaming under the soft light. He watched her with those deep, knowing eyes, then stood and padded away down the hall. Claire took that as an invitation. Inside the room was unlike any she had seen on the ship. The walls were lined with living vines that pulsed with soft green light. Floating orbs drifted slowly near the ceiling, casting shifting patterns on the floor. Lyria stood by the window, arms crossed, staring out at the void. "You are on time," she said without turning. "Barely late counts as on time in my book." Lyria turned now. She wore a simpler robe today, dark blue with silver threads. Her hair was tied back, but a few strands had escaped, framing her face. She looked less like a princess and more like someone carrying a heavy thought. "The Concord has assigned you to me officially. You are now my liaison for the duration of the summit." "Why me?" "Because you sat down." That was it. No tests, no interviews, no background check. Just because she had done something no one else would do. "What do I do?" "You listen. You observe. You speak only when asked. And you do not touch anything that glows." Claire nodded. "Got it." They spent the morning reviewing star charts and treaty drafts. Lyria spoke in calm, measured tones, explaining border disputes and resource allocations. Claire listened carefully, asking few questions but remembering everything. She noticed how Lyria always paused before mentioning the Kavor War, how her fingers tightened slightly on the data pad. She also noticed the way Nyx would flick his tail when certain names were spoken. In the afternoon, they boarded a small shuttle for a short jump to the neutral moon of Saloon. The summit would move there for the final negotiations. The shuttle was sleek and silent, piloted by a Silthari officer who barely acknowledged Claire. Halfway through the jump, the lights flickered, then went out. The engine stuttered. Alarms blared, then cut off abruptly. "We are losing power," the pilot said, his voice tight. Claire was already moving. She unbuckled and floated toward the rear console. The Silthari systems were elegant but complex, full of layers of logic that assumed everything would work perfectly. When things broke, they had no backup plan. She opened a panel and started rewiring by hand using spare cables from her belt. Her fingers moved fast, sure. She bypassed the main regulator, rerouted coolant flow, and forced a manual restart on the thrusters. Sparks flew. Smoke curled from the panel. But the lights came back on. The engines hummed steady. "How did you do that?" the pilot asked, stunned. "We call it jury-rigging. When fancy stuff fails, you go simple." Lyria watched from her seat, her expression unreadable. But when Claire floated back to her chair, she said quietly, "You saved us." "Just doing my job." That night on Saloon, the air was thin and cold. The moon had no cities, only a series of domes built into the rock. Claire and Lyria shared a dome near the edge, overlooking a sea of silver dust. Nyx curled by the door, his eyes half closed but alert. As they prepared for sleep, Claire noticed something odd. The comms unit in the corner kept pulsing with a faint red light even though it was off. She pointed it out. Lyria went still. She walked over, examined it, then touched a hidden seam on the wall. A panel slid open, revealing a tangle of wires. Some were cut, others rerouted. Someone tampered with it. Sabotage. Yes. But why target us? Lyria did not answer right away. She stared at the wires as if they held a secret. Then she said the Kavor War did not end cleanly. Some believe it never ended at all. Claire felt a chill that had nothing to do with the moon's cold. The next day, during a routine systems check, Claire found more anomalies. Gravity fluctuations in Corridor 3. False readings in the oxygen mix. A drone that kept circling their dome even though it was assigned to the far side. She told Lyria, who listened without interrupting. When Claire finished, Lyria said, "Follow me." They went deep into the dome's understructure to a sealed chamber marked with Silthari script. Lyria placed her palm on the door and it opened. Inside was a small archive glowing with stored light. "This is forbidden knowledge," she said. "Few have seen it." She activated a console and images filled the air. Old battles. Shattered fleets. Cities turned to glass. Then something else. Beings that looked almost normal, but their eyes were wrong too, still too empty. They moved in perfect sync like puppets on invisible strings. What are they? We called them the Hollow. They were not born. They were made. Infected by a signal that rewrote the mind. Turned thought into echo. Will into command. The signal came from where? We do not know. It vanished after the war. Or so we thought. Claire looked at the images, then at Lyria. "You think it is back? I know it is. The sabotage. The strange behavior of some delegates. The way Nyx growls at certain people. He senses the wrongness." That night Claire could not sleep. She paced the dome, listening to the wind howl outside. Nyx watched her from his corner. Finally she sat near him. "You know something, don't you?" The dragon blinked slowly. Then he lifted his head and made a soft clicking sound. Not a purr. Something else. A warning. Suddenly the lights went out again, not just in their dome. Everywhere. The hum of life support stopped. Silence pressed in thick and heavy. Claire grabbed her sidearm and moved to the door. Lyria appeared from the shadows, her eyes wide, not with fear but with recognition. "They are here." "Who?" "The Hollow." Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Too many, too quiet. Claire peeked through the viewport in the door. Figures moved in the dark. Their movements smooth, too smooth. No hesitation, no wasted motion. "We need to get out. The main lift is compromised. There is a service tunnel behind the archive." They ran. Nyx led the way, his claws clicking on the metal floor. The tunnel was narrow and dark, lit only by the faint glow from Lyria's hand. Behind them, the dome door hissed open. They reached a small hangar where a single scout ship waited. Claire jumped into the cockpit and started the systems. Lyria climbed in behind her. Nyx squeezed into the cargo hold. As the ship lifted off, something slammed into the side. Claire banked hard, dodging another impact. Through the viewport she saw figures clinging to the hull, their faces blank, their eyes dark. "Hold on," she yelled. She fired the thrusters full power, shooting straight up through the dome roof. Glass shattered. Alarms wailed. Then they were in the sky, climbing fast toward orbit. Once clear, Claire checked the scanners. No pursuit. Yet, Lyria sat in the co-pilot seat, breathing hard. Her hands trembled slightly. For the first time she looked young. Vulnerable. Why did they come for us? Because I carry something they want. What? A memory. A key locked in my bloodline. And in Nyx, Claire looked back at the cargo hold. The dragon met her eyes. In that moment she understood. Nyx was not just a pet. He was a guardian, a weapon, a living archive. They returned to the Aetheris under emergency clearance. Medics checked them but found no injuries, only exhaustion. The Concorde was told it was a gas leak, a tragic accident. Claire knew better. That evening, Lyria came to Claire's quarters. Nyx followed as always. "You saved my life twice now," Lyria said. "I was just doing my job." "No. You chose to stay. You chose to see. That is not duty. That is something else." Claire didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. Lyria stepped closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "My kind believes in order and pattern and perfect design. But you humans, you thrive in chaos. You build from broken things. You see paths where we see only walls. Is that a compliment? It is an observation, and perhaps a hope." She turned to leave, then paused. "Tomorrow we return to the summit. Things will get worse before they get better. Stay close to me. And trust Nyx, I do." Lyria looked surprised. Then she nodded and left. Claire sat on her bed, staring at the wall. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. But inside her, something had changed. She was no longer just a pilot, no longer just a liaison. She was part of something ancient and dangerous. And she was not afraid, because fear did not fly ships. Instinct did. Courage did. And maybe, just maybe, a little bit of stubborn human hope. Nyx made a soft sound from the hallway, almost like a sigh.